Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this masterclass on reimagining learning during crisis as a part of Arthan's initiative on building civil society organizations of the future. My name is Mridula, and I work with Arthan. Today, we spent the day with many eminent speakers during our Future of Education track to begin a dialogue on how education can be reimagined to truly address the needs of this uncertain and very different future that beckons us. The past few months have sent the world reeling with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. The civil society, like all other sectors, is dealing with the repercussions, and conversations about scripting the new normal are being heard across the board. But what is this new normal? It is imperative that we begin this process now and define it for the next decade if we want to achieve the sustainable development goals, progress towards which has been pushed back due to the pandemic. Building civil society organizations of the future is a long term, future oriented, and multi stakeholder initiative by Arthan to build a cohort of institutions that will collectively co create solutions to co evolve out of the pandemic and define the future of civil society organizations in India. The initiative will run from June 2020 to December 2021 and will address ecosystem challenges by seeking to build a sustainable and resilient strategy for an inclusive future. Arthon is committed to bringing in diverse voices in the sector across regions, languages, and gender, and building accountability by converting these dialogues into action. We launched this initiative with the Future of Fundraising track on 22nd of June, which was followed by Future of Jobs track on June 25 and 26. These days saw over 500 people participating and more than 50 speakers. The initiative will cover multiple themes, including but not limited to women's leadership, gender, urban planning, agriculture, climate action, impact investing, strategy, and so on. This constantly evolving universe will bring together more than 3,000 leaders from the social impact sector as speakers and build capacity of over 10,000 civil society organizations across sectors over the next 2 years. These details can also be found on our website, arthanevents.com. You can check the same out and reach out to us in case of any collaborations. Today, for this masterclass on reimagining learning during crisis, we are joined by Karthik Menon, Mihika Sharma, Siddesh Mahatre, and Manushi Yadav from Pratham. And we will get to know more about Pratham's learning from this period as they bring to the forefront the challenges they confronted in their attempt to redesign education programs during the pandemic. I will introduce Manushi now, who will be moderating the session today. Manushi has been with Pratham since 2015 and is currently leading program operations and management for Pratham's education programs. Her key responsibilities include operations and external stakeholder management, for which her team works with state and program teams to plan, track, document, and review Pratham programs. The team also manages donor engagement and business development activities to fundraise for the education programs. I welcome all of you, and Manushi, over to you now.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen over here. But before that, I wanted my teammates to get the chance to introduce themselves because, of course, over Zoom, once I start sharing my screen, I think you won't be able to see all of us. So, Karthik, if you'd like to start.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Karthik Menon. I co-lead the measurement monitoring and evaluation unit at Pratham, where basically the internal M&E team that looks at measurement of all the interventions that we do directly or in partnership with the government. I've been with Pratham for about 4 years.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Siddesh Matre. I co-lead the measurement monitoring and evaluation team, and I've been with Pratham for the last 5 years now. Over to Mihika.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mihika Sharma. I'm a part of the program management team at Pratham, and I particularly support early childhood education programs running across different states across the country. Manushi, would you like to just...
Yeah, I'm just going to do that. I will be controlling the presentation for today. So Mihika, how about you start and I'll try to make sure I'm in sync with you guys.
Okay, sure. So jumping right in, but before we begin, I'd just like to give a quick outline of how we're thinking about the 1.5 hours we have today. We'll begin by giving a brief overview about the context in which Pratham's programs were operating before the pandemic. We'll then talk about the key challenges that the COVID crisis sprung up in terms of our implementation. and the key steps that we took in order to continue staying in touch with communities during the crisis. We'll also talk about how we work to capture the key learnings during this period and measure the impact of what we were doing. And finally, we'll talk about how we are looking at the next phase, the remainder of the academic year, and what the upcoming landscape looks like, and what our thinking to that end is. And finally, we'll open up for questions, comments, and answer any questions that anybody has. So jumping right in, Pratham, just to give some brief context, has been working towards improving the quality of education since 1995. Our education programs span multiple age groups. They begin as early as age 3, or what we call preschool, continue to early grades or grades 1 and 2, through primary and upper primary grades. So we have programs for grades 3 to 5 and grades 6 to 8, as well as beyond elementary. One example of which is a program under which we help women who may have dropped out of school and not completed their 10th grade secondary school examination complete their education. And cross-cutting across all these elements is a component of digital learning and innovation, which aims to aid the learning process and help children learn on their own and get access to a wider variety of content. Our programs are currently underway in over 20 states and union territories, and they're implemented in 2 key ways. The first is directly, by which we mean that Pratham teams directly conduct teaching learning activities and engagement activities with children and communities in the villages of intervention. And the second is in partnership with the government, under which we aim to help the government integrate Pratham's methods into its own machinery and systems, train government cadres on Pratham's methodologies, and also help improve processes in terms of planning, review, tracking, etc. On average, we reach around 5 lakh children and youth each year through our direct programs, and these were implemented in around 5,000 villages last year. In partnership with the government, we were in 15 states. We were working in partnership with the government in 15 states last year, reaching almost 50 lakh children. So quickly, before we get into the approach, I'd just like to spend a few minutes talking about a few guiding principles or salient features, as you may call it, which find its way into all our programming and which actually emerged as some of the key levers when we pivoted our efforts post-COVID. The first is that all our programs use local resources and so are contextualized, low cost, but high impact, durable, and replicable. The second is that all our methods are simple in the sense that a common person is able to understand the material, methodology, and practices that are used and implement it in their own context easily. In fact, all our programs are implemented by young people who are actually from the same communities where our interventions are implemented. The third is that there is a strong aspect of community involvement in all our programs. We believe in not only influencing community anchors, but also meaningfully engaging them in our programs. And finally, there's a very strong focus on robust measurement and assessment, such that we're able to track the effectiveness of our programs and measure it against the goals that we set at the beginning of the academic year. And so when we think about the approach to our work, and if we look at 2 age groups, which is the early years age group and the primary grades age group, what remains common across the board is that there is a focus on improving foundational learning abilities of children. How we do this is that in the early years, we focus on building strong foundations over time in an age and stage appropriate manner. While in the primary grades, the focus is on helping children catch up academically where required. And this is done through learning camps typically, and then supporting this work through community-based work over time. Where do we do these interventions? A typical Pratham team member would spend their day between the school Anganwadi, the immediate adjoining neighborhood or mohalla, and the broader village. In the school and Anganwadi, there are direct instructional activities that are conducted with children and which involve the local government teacher or the Anganwadi worker, as the case may be. In primary grades, this intervention is typically called learning camps, which is implemented over a 30 to 40 day period and which groups children by learning levels instead of by age or grade. In the neighborhood, we try to sustain the impact of this instructional work through the creation of community-based groups. While for the early years, these groups are of mothers, For primary grades, these are actually children's groups. And what these groups help us do is sustain learning and activities even when the period of instruction in schools is over. And finally, in the village or the community, there are periodic community events and assessment fairs that would be conducted. And this would help us bring the larger community together. And across all of this were key anchors that were holding our intervention together, in addition to the Pratham facilitator. So for early years, mothers were at the forefront of what we were doing. Anganwadi workers played a very crucial role, and local community volunteers helped us implement developmental activities in Anganwadi centers. For older age groups as well, older siblings, youth volunteers played a large role in sustaining what we were doing in the community centers. And so, in addition to directly engaging with children, a major focus of our work pre-COVID had been on building and maintaining strong connections with community anchors. And that proved to be useful, as we'll talk about later. And finally, running across this is a thread of what we call digital learning, which includes multiple aspects of content, technology, and social structures. This runs across age groups. So there's content created for different age groups. There's content created across domains. So not only limited to language and math, but also art, music, theater, and so on. As well as this content is available in at least 11 regional languages. And so over the past many years, we've created this extensive repository of digital content. And this has fed into our programs through tablets and other digital devices, and by leveraging the community networks that we have established over the past many years. And so this is where we were pre-COVID, say February, mid-March, and that's when the crisis hit us, and our on-field operations were immediately halted. We were at a very crucial phase of our intervention. We were about to start the end line. We were about to wrap up the academic year, start the end line for the year, and begin planning for the next year. And so, Karthik, I'd like to hand over to you to probably just take us through the key challenges that this situation threw up.
Okay, thank you, Mehika. So till now, we got a flavor of what we were doing till COVID hit us. And in mid-March, like with everyone else, our work also was impacted by COVID. First, I want to highlight some of the challenges that we saw in the world outside that everyone faced. Firstly, which is a wide-known fact, that that 300 million learners are out of school because Anganwadis and schools are closed. Secondly, movement or movement in the community or in urban areas is limited or was non-existent. There was lack of awareness about health as well as sanitation practices. And lastly, there was lack of preparedness at home for learning. And this was in a couple of forms. Firstly, content, because this happened so abruptly. No one was really ready with the resources that they needed to learn at home. Secondly, access to any form of technology was also not readily available across the board. So these are some of the common challenges that we see around the world and especially in India as well. At the same time, Pratham in its own world also faced its own challenges. We have a large team spanning across 20 odd districts, and we needed to ensure that all of them reach home safely. All our operations and communications were now technology focused. We were very used to interacting with each other face to face. Now we were completely dependent on technology. Any sort of instruction, training, review, or discussion, we had to do remotely with teams which are all over the country and the state. And like every other organization, we had work from home issues. You can imagine that we have close to 7,000 people who work for Pratham, and majority of them spend their day in the field. They go to the school in the morning, they go to an Anganwadi in the morning, then in the afternoon, they go interact with other stakeholders, and finally in the evening, they're in a village. So it was a huge adjustment for everyone to really accept the term work from home. But we were doing that. And finally, we needed to go with the principle to do more with less. Of course, we have committed donors who understand what we were going through, but moving forward, we can understand that priorities may shift. There is, health is a key area where money needs to flow. So we can anticipate that we will need to do more while having fewer resources. Now, thinking of these two things, these two twin challenges, I would say, in the outside world as well as in Pratham, we needed to come up with a remote learning solution, because at the end of the day, we're going to focus on learning and improving that at scale. So to do that, we had to answer 5 questions, which could actually pave a way for a solution. The first one was, what was the type of content that we needed? Mihika had mentioned that we had a large repository of digital content that was already available, which we were not using extensively across all programs, but it was there. We needed to see how much of it could be realigned, and also maybe had to develop new content depending on the technology infrastructure that's available. Secondly, through our programs with the government or directly, we had built a community network. We needed to see how to leverage this network so that a remote learning solution could be implemented. Then the next part would be, how would we connect and capture whatever we're doing, whoever we're engaging with, whatever we're learning. So we need to figure that out. And obviously, we are not the only ones doing this. So it's important for us to collaborate with other organizations and the government. Finally, moving ahead, if we could find answers to all of this, we had to build our own capacity to actually deliver remote learning, and as well as pass it on to others who are helping us do this. So based on our prior experiences and some experimentation that we did in the last 3 months, we came up with remote learning solutions, which now I would hand over to Manushi, and she'll tell you more about how we tackle the 5 C's. Over to you.
Thank you, Kartik. So I think what Mihika and Kartik have captured so far gives a strong base to the audience right now to understand what is it that Pratham does on a general, in a pre-COVID way. What did we do? And of course, then the challenges that are similar to what a lot of organizations would have faced, but we've tried to put down in a clear fashion what were the 5 C's that we wanted to respond to immediately. And of course, given that when this lockdown had struck, it was something that happened across the country, but it was a sudden thing. There was a way to prioritize what to respond to first. So our immediate reaction, of course, was to first ensure that our team, which Kartik mentioned, we have 7,000 plus folks spread across the country, a lot of them working outside of their home districts. They made it safely back home, first of all. The second step was to establish communication lines internally as well as externally, right? So we were to be able to move into a work from home mode. We needed a way to communicate from, let's say, head offices in Delhi and Mumbai to, state offices at the capitals, as well as to the last person on the ground that we have who is sitting at their home and may not have good internet access. So these communication lines need to be figured out internally. And at the same time, who is this person, the last person at Pratham on the ground connected to externally, needed to be figured out. But one of the things that was clear to us was that the work that we've done over these many years in working with communities, we needed to ensure that there is some level of engagement that continues, because in the absence of any kind of engagement, all of this social structure that we talk about would disintegrate. And there was definitely a clear need to engage children who were now facing a very stressful situation at home. But at the same time, there was a need to address some of the questions that may not have had anything to do with education at home as well. There were a lot of myths around COVID. There is a general lack of awareness about health. There didn't exist enough data around this, communication around this in local languages. So we needed to make sure that we have the channels to whom we can, using which we can communicate to communities the right kind of content. From an education perspective, we came up with a slightly cheeky title of Corona Thodi Masti Thodi Padhai. The idea was to engage children during this period through remote learning. And there were 4 key aspects to our work, starting with communities and connections. Like I mentioned, and my colleagues before me have mentioned, we work with communities very closely. There was a need to make sure that we continue engaging with these communities and to connect with them in the right fashion. We have been, for the past 5 years or so, been investing heavily on developing a technology layer across all of our programs. But in a usual day-to-day stuff pre-COVID, we were looking forward, right? We were looking at exploring in a way that we can connect every community to internet. We can provide offline and online content. But here was a time to take a step back and actually look at access first. Because when we started to analyze these connections, we realized that in certain states, less than 10 to 20% of our reach, actually the communities that we were working with, actually had access to smartphones and internet connectivity. And this number was going to go down as fewer people recharged their phone going forward. So we had to make sure that we're not just looking at WhatsApp as a medium, but also traditional SMSs, which I think a lot of us have even forgotten how to send anymore, which have a character limit of 164 characters. We had to make sure that this connect is two-way. So we're not just sending out information blindly. We are connecting with someone who is receiving this message and is responding to us, and we are clearing any doubts that may come in between. For all of this, we needed the right kind of content. This content needed to be across domains, across age groups, and across language. We needed to reconfigure some of our internal teams to be able to create this content out of the existing repository as well as fresh content to keep a steady level of engagement over the past 3 months. This meant, like I mentioned, SMSs, they have a limit for 164 characters. In some states, in some languages, because the script is different, it's even fewer words than that. To be able to communicate effectively and exercise for a child that you are sending to a volunteer or to a mother, it was work that had to be done internally to be able to do that. But more than all of this, whatever solutions that we are creating out of all of this, there is only a fraction of the audience that we can reach ourselves. So the last key aspect of our effort was collaboration. We needed to ensure that we are not just doing this for the 11,000 or so communities that we work with, but we're able to create an open solution that can be leveraged by governments who were proactive towards in addressing this problem, but also other civil society organizations who were rallying together to find a solution to this problem. So I will go into the details of a few of these before we talk about, we link it back to the 5 C's that Karthik mentioned. Connecting with communities. I will talk about a small flow of how this was done and how exactly it was a two-way exercise. It started with, as I said, our central content teams. They curated certain guidelines for SMS and WhatsApp communication. These messages were then translated into regional languages at present by our state teams. All of this is our existing structure being redesigned to service in the pandemic affected time, lockdown period. So we always have had content teams at the state and central level. How they are going to approach from a traditional way to a digital way needed to be done now. These messages, once translated, were then sent to the implementation team on the ground, which is now not inside the schools, but stuck inside their homes. So these messages are received by the person who's on the ground, but this is the person who is who has always been in touch with his communities. If we go by one of our traditional models of working, each person is responsible for 5 villages where he conducts activities, he or she conducts activities inside the school or Anganwadis in the morning, and in the evening interacts with parents and other community level stakeholders. So this is the person who has really strong links to the communities, and it's a known face. So it's this person who shares the message with the parents and the volunteers, and then calls to clarify the activity that especially in case of an SMS, because it is it's going to be in a very short message form. Following this, the parents conduct activities in home. They're often supported by family members, especially in the first month and a half when movement was completely restricted. Parents shared photos and videos of their children doing activities with this Pratham person. This could only be possible because of existing links that we had with the community, because there was a trust factor in what this person had done over years with these families, been connected to them and been working with children in the village. Lastly, the key element which led to a two-way interaction was that the Pratham person always conducted a follow-up call to understand the challenges, to take feedback, and then we followed an internal mechanism on how this feedback could be captured centrally so that the loop is actually closed, so that the central team via the state team is made aware of how this is being received and if any changes need to be done. Moving to our next C, which is contact across all age groups. Here we've tried to just outline some of the broad areas. So if I go back to when Mihika talked about different kinds of programs that we've done. So for early years, we've always relied on mothers as anchors. So our target audience receiving our activities via SMS or WhatsApp were mothers who were working with children at home. These activities, though very simple in nature, were fundamentally around one of the developmental domains for early childhood development. They could talk about cognitive development, there were puzzles, rhymes, stories, and such. For the age, for the children in grades 1 to 8 right now stuck at home, we wanted to, while of course, stimulate learning through on foundational reading and arithmetic, but we needed it to be fun and engaging. These are children who are locked up at home, might not understand why this is happening. And this was also a period when most of these would have had summer holidays. So we didn't want it to be academic heavy. Neither did we want it to be in a shape or form where parents cannot assist. So almost all of this work was project based. It included fun activities that they could do at home. Art, music, theater were common themes in addition to specific subjects that we've always covered. Lastly, we wanted to make sure that this link that we have to children, which is either a youth volunteer, an elder sibling, or a parent who's also stuck at home, is turning into an agent of change, right? It is this person that we will have to rely on for maybe months to come, given that, you know, mobility for our people, for external folks to enter village, it's not going to happen anytime soon. So there was content being shared with them as well to make sure that they are, they are being, that it's moving in a sustainable fashion where these people will be there to last as anchors. So we try to put down some snapshots actually for everyone of learning and fun activities. On the left-hand side is actually, the WhatsApp message that has gone, which has links to our YouTube channel, has specific questions. But if you see, almost all of this is fun and project-based, but there is an element of learning here. If I talk about younger children, so simpler content, around simple, riddles for the day. And if you look at specifically at the bottom right of your screen, that's the message that has SMS that has gone out. So there is always a link between the SMS and the WhatsApp to make sure that just access to internet doesn't mean that a child gets, a different kind of exposure. So everyone getting the same kind of, content every day was very important. So one key thing to see is how did people respond. Right now, I'm not getting into the data of it. This is anecdotal evidence that we collected on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, we sent a very simple video of a mother explaining to a child about plants. This is what we received back. So it's a simple activity. We could see that families were doing that together, and the enthusiasm with which we received these pictures made us realize that yes, engagement is happening. Right now, we're not looking at quantifying it, but we can see that there is some engagement, of course. These are two SMSs. We've put the English translation for it here, which talk about simple activities that mothers can do. The one on the right is actually, if we talk about from a development perspective, it's actually fine motor skills for a mother to help to work with a child to peel garlic or peas together. This is what we received. So mothers enthusiastically doing this work, clicking a picture at home, sending it out to the person who had sent this message to us, was something that we at that point of time counted as as a measure of effectiveness of this work that we are doing. And of course, lastly, we come back to collaborating with others. So far, if we see on the screen, I've already talked about SMS, WhatsApp, and audio calls. But all of this was, all these three things were what we were doing in places where we work directly, where we have direct links with the community. We could establish a two-way connection. In addition to that, we worked with partners, whether CSOs or governments across the country, to make whatever we do, our content as well as our approach, more accessible to others. In some places, government themselves took the initiative to use a different media to be able to deliver this. For example, the beginning of May, we started a radio program in Nagpur, Maharashtra, which was, I'm sorry, I can't speak Marathi, so I can't take the name correctly, but it's essentially school outside of school. And the idea there was that we used this radio as a medium because, again, access was a challenge, but more importantly, teachers within the system took the responsibility of calling at home for these children to make sure that the entire family listens in and then does the activity together. And this was broadcasted thrice, this is still being broadcasted thrice a week for the past 2.5 months or so. This program, with its success, was later on adopted in Uttar Pradesh towards the end of June. We have a TV program running in Bihar, Jharkhand, Rajasthan, where Children's Hour, so to say, is being used to telecast content around games and learning and fun activities for children in these states. And lastly, there exists there's a centralized content portal as well as state level content portals that exist across different states from the government's end. We ensured that all of our video content and games and such were tagged according to domains, according to age and learning outcomes. And they were uploaded on these portals and were made available to teachers across the board, because this COVID situation is, it's not disappearing overnight. As we move forward, we'll need access to digital content for teachers as well as they plan whatever will happen once the schools reopen. So this was our attempt to make sure that we're not just reaching out the 11,000 communities that we've always been working with, but we are providing solutions to industry at large and are able to collaborate with governments and other not-for-profits alike. So, so far I've covered, out of the 5 C's that Karthik talked about, I have tried to cover the first 4. However, one element of capture is missing, which was the quantifiable part of the impact that we've done. And for that, I'll hand it over to Siddesh. So Siddesh, if you'd like to talk about the measurement part of our work.
Thanks, Manushi. So Manushi spoke about 2 clear ways of working, which was one is internally, where we had a direct contact with communities. That's where we call it a 2-way communication channel, where we could speak to the volunteers, we could speak to the parents, and they could talk to us as well. And then there was an external channel where we shared content. Content was shared through radio, TV, IVR. There were different kind of mediums which were done. So right now we'll focus on the direct contact, where we could collect a lot more data from the volunteers as well as parents. So Pratham's presence has been in 21 states, 226 districts, and more than 11,000 communities. What we call as our direct contact communities for elementary school age group. Pratham worked with children's groups before the lockdown happened. We could visit these children on a weekly basis. We could share some content with them, and they could do a project over the week. But after the lockdown, as we started sending SMS and WhatsApp, we had to reach not to children directly, but then through volunteers as well as parents. So that's where we reached around 9,000 odd communities. More than 1 lakh volunteers were reached through our WhatsApp messages, which Manushi showed some time ago. And also the SMS component. We figured out that not everyone has a smartphone in villages. And SMS was a medium where we had to bank on to ensure that this content was also delivered on SMS. Around 60,000 volunteers across these 21 states and 11,000 communities were reached through an SMS message, where one message of 160 characters, a simple, a small story or a riddle was shared through the SMS medium. We also had a reach, Pratham also had a direct contact with the preschool age group, or children of age group 3 to 8 years old, where Pratham before the lockdown worked with mothers groups, where again we shared some content, we met them on a regular basis, and then they did some activities with children. This reach is around 2,700 communities, and SMSs were shared with 13,000 volunteers and WhatsApp with 15,000 volunteers. When I say 13,000, 15,000 volunteers for the preschool age group, majority of the component over here, the majority of our volunteers were mothers of preschool children who did the activities or conducted the activities with children. I mean, the biggest part to think about this, or how we ensure that we move from an in-person network to a SMS and WhatsApp based network, was a key challenge for us. One, to understand how to proceed, and second, establish this network and then start sharing the content which we earlier discussed. Yeah, Manishi, next one. Our measurement approach was two-pronged. One was our large-scale tracking, which I would say was a light method to track reach, as well as track number of volunteers or number of SMSs and WhatsApp we sent to volunteers across villages. That was on a daily basis to ensure that we got some quick numbers to understand over time if this reach is increasing or decreasing. In the last 3 months, livelihoods have also been impacted. So we were expecting that the number of WhatsApp numbers will go down over time. So we're monitoring to understand if the SMS and WhatsApp were at a level, and accordingly, content could be shared using these key tracking methods. On the deep dive front, we were focusing more on learning by doing. We shared something, we tried something out, we pilot, like Pratham's philosophy is more around pilots. Like we pilot anything before that is shared with communities or children. So this mode was focused on piloting, learning, and feeding back our learnings back into the content that which was created. So for our large scale tracking, our key indicators, or what we call as in the measurement jargon, key performance indicators, were one, number of reach, which is number of volunteers and parents with whom SMS and WhatsApp was shared. Second, the key component, we didn't just want to share SMSs. We also wanted to follow up to ensure that did this message actually reach the phone of a parent? Have they read the message? Are they also conducting this message with the children? So this follow-up call consisted of around a 2 to 5 minute call with the parent and volunteer to ensure they receive the message and they did the activity with their children. Another important indicator was to ensure that volunteers and parents, once they conducted the activity, getting some response to understand if, for example, if a word problem was shared, what was the answer that the child came up with? How did the volunteer help out the child? These were the kind of phone calls which happened, and we also tracked these numbers on a daily as well as weekly basis. The data collected for these indicators were on Android apps created by our own teams, and the Android apps were pre-installed on the phones of our Pratham team members, who quickly punched in this data on a daily basis. They basically took the collation of data maybe took longer. It would take them around 20 minutes to collate this data. But once you enter aggregate data, that process took 5 minutes. So ensuring that quickly this data was entered, was visualized, was shared with all teams, that was part of our large scale tracking. On the deep dive studies front, we focused on a very small sample. We basically took a microscope and we put it on 11 villages, and we tried to understand what actually happens in these villages. So if I have to put a microscope on a village in measurement terms, you'd see hamlets. You'd see different hamlets in a village. A village would be divided into 3 or 4 hamlets, or they're called as mohallas in Hindi regions, or padas in Marathi regions. We try to understand what actually happens in these hamlets. Who are we able to reach? Are we able to reach the volunteers who joined us or who are part of the Pratham, I would say, family, or before the lockdown, or were they new volunteers we had to reach out to after the lockdown? We also conducted detailed interviews with these volunteers, with parents, with mothers, trying to understand what was their response. Did they like the activities that we sent? Was anyone else also sending activities to them? So basically, the question of access, was it just Pratham, or was it also others who were sharing these content? We're trying to get some daily feedback in terms of what was being shared with the parent. Lastly, we also focused on children. I mean, especially like younger children may not share answers directly with our field team members, but children of the age group 3 to 5, standard 3 to 5 or standard 6 to 8, they regularly spoke to our field team members. They gave us important feedback. Rather than feedback, they shared responses, which activity they liked or which activity they didn't like so much. We always had those hits and other activities where we could do better kind of insights. Insights from these in-depth interviews were backed by stories in the field or stories from the. We tried to connect what data was being shown on a dashboard with what stories are being shared by a CRL or a Pratham field team member or a volunteer. And a combination of both led to learnings which were fed back into the content designing kind of system. So basically, I'll show you maybe later in the slide where how a SMS can be structured into multiple components. So yeah. So key learning. So I mean, there have been a bunch of deep dive studies. I've lost count, but broadly they are categorized into two categories, which is for the earliest age group, which I said as ages 3 to 8, and the elementary grades age group, which is standard 1 to 8. Key learning. So if I have to just quote key learnings, this is no justice to what work which was done in these deep dive studies, because data was collected for more than 50 villages, more than around 400 volunteers, over not just for one particular day, but over the week. Every day we collected some data from them. And the key learnings from the data that was collected in depth from our microscope approach was that 69% of children for early years, we could reach 69% of the children of whom basically we could reach before the lockdown. So if you're reaching 100 before the lockdown, after the lockdown we reached 69, but there were also new children that we were able to reach. I mean, there were many more new children or new volunteers we could reach, and number of lives which could be impacted. A very key insight which was basically our hypothesis behind trying to understand why we should conduct a deep dive activity was, before the lockdown, mothers groups was a key component which helped us conduct any activities with children. So we're trying to figure out if, again, do these mothers stick with us when we share SMS and WhatsApp? The answer was yes. 89% of the children were helped in doing an activity by a mother. Also, if I have to add some children data to it, on any given day, in a sample of around 30 villages, we try to figure this out. On any given day, more than 90% children did the activities of those children who received an activity. More than 90% children did those activities. We also have very interesting insights from our elementary grades program or volunteers who are associated with children belonging to elementary grades. 42% of our volunteers, I know this is a small sample, but still it's a key learning for us, where more volunteers, around 40% of our volunteers were new volunteers. They were part of a network after the lockdown. So our reach of volunteers has basically increased if we compare to our work which was done before the lockdown. Also, our volunteer profile has kind of changed because we are reaching out to community members through SMS and phones. And most of these phones belong to parents, be a father, a mother, or any family member. 64% of our volunteers are categorized as parents, while others would be an elder sibling or a village youth in family or in the village. In terms of engagement, we also try to understand how children respond to different types of activities. If we send a word problem, what is the response that we get? If we send a riddle, or if we send a content or language based riddle where an answer is expected from a child, how do they respond? So the activities are across different domains. It could be storytelling, it could be writing, it could be solving a simple math problem, it could be solving a slightly difficult word problem. There were many activities we were shared, and we had tried. These deep dive studies also gave us a good understanding of what activities are. I mean, what are the kind of activities which could be shared with parents as well as children. So I'll basically, maybe if I have to put a microscope even further on one activity. We put a microscope on a village. We have put a microscope on maybe hamlets and volunteers. But if you have to go even deeper in terms of one activity and what is the children's response, you'll see. So this activity is a riddle. It's basically a 6-line riddle. You would want to maybe try solving this later after the call. But this riddle answer is expected from the child. And if we have to break this down into multiple parts, you'll see 3 components. So basically what type of support do children require across these components. First thing, a child, so if I have to break down this 160 character message, so this is maybe too deep an analysis, but this was very useful for us even when we had discussions with the content teams. A 160 character SMS could be broken down across stages. First stage is reading the message, trying to understand if the child can read the message. That's where the ability of the child comes in. If the child is a reader, he can read the message, he or she can read the message on his own. If he's not, he or she would need some support. Second part after reading is understanding, trying to understand what is being asked in this message. And lastly is solving. You probably use some analytical skills or problem solving skills to come up with an answer. So we see varied results over here. 32% of the children required some kind of this data. Most of our children that we reached out to in this sample were readers. That's why very less children actually required some kind of help. Second component was understanding. So, okay, I read the riddle, but do I know what to do? So 75% of the children were helped by some volunteer during the understanding phase, trying to understand what is being asked. And finally, 58% of the children were helped in solving this riddle, trying to answer, coming up with the end product which was expected. They were trying to come up with this answer with the help of the volunteer. So if I go ahead, around I think 19% children required no help in doing any of these activities. They did it on their own. So what did the children achieve? If we again look at the achievement of children across these different steps. So basically you can start with step 1. So yeah, one sheet next. If you have to divide this into multiple components, again it is reading, it is understanding and answering. So children's results also varied across these different components. So if I have to break down the sample size around 50 to 60 children, but if I have to break down this 100% across numbers, you'd see these numbers add up. So 23 plus 26 plus 51 would be the entire sample. So 23% only reached the first part of the activity, which is reading. They read the activity and they couldn't go further. Either they were not helped, or either they didn't receive any support, or someone was probably not home when they were doing the activity. Next part, understanding. 26% more children reached the understanding stage, where they could understand the activity but maybe not try to answer. That's where they got stuck. And 51% of the children actually were able to answer in some way. The answer may be correct or wrong, but they were able to articulate an answer and share their answers with the volunteer, which was again shared with our field team member. So the overall result would be 86. So basically 86% of the children who could answer was readers. So we see a clear correlation that better is the reading ability of the child, better they can do any of these SMS as well as WhatsApp activities, which again in turn focuses on learning level, which is an important component going ahead, where we'll speak further on. So overall result is 33% children could answer this activity correctly. Now you see very simple steps over here. There are only 3 steps. More complex the activity, if I put a word problem in rather than a riddle, then these 3 steps would become maybe 5. Understanding numbers, understanding what operations required, order of operations, putting numbers together, and then coming up with an answer. What our key learning was visualizing our activities in these steps. For children of the standard 1 to 2 age group, some simple activities like these, where you have 1 or 2 steps or 3 steps at max, can be shared. If for older children, we could make it slightly more complex and share those activities accordingly. So that these were key learnings which are again being used into designing content when we send SMS and WhatsApp in the future. So this is mainly our, so we have done this for basically thrice or 4 times right now, and we are continuing to do these deep dive analysis across different domains. Activity was 1, reach was 2nd, trying to understand reach in a village. Going further, going ahead, we are planning more on the numbers that I showed earlier in terms of volunteers. We are trying to understand who of these volunteers could be our key volunteers or anchor volunteers who will support us if we are to do more. If you have to do more activities than just sending SMS and WhatsApp, who are these volunteers who can support us? So, I mean, there are many results in the pipeline, but maybe on some other masterclass that we could be sharing. Next. So, Karthik will cover the internal phone-based surveys that we conducted and collected data from the field.
Thanks, Sid. So quickly now, whatever Siddesh just spoke about was our deep measurement into the work that we were doing directly through our community network and the volunteers. As you may know, that it's not only Pratham that is delivering content via WhatsApp or to radio. The government, various state governments across the board are also delivering content, and they were actually quite uh, proactive in delivering such content. And as early as April, many state governments had figured out a way of delivering, of curating content from variety of organizations, including ours, as well as their own content, and putting them in simple WhatsApp and sending those messages to teacher WhatsApp groups, and then expecting the teacher to take it forward. Now, in the early days, I call this early days, but in April and May, these were the only mechanisms that they were using. Everyone was scrambling, and to the credit of the government, of various state governments, they were very quick to develop this mechanism of sharing some sort of content via smartphones, which does require internet, but sharing something nonetheless through the government network. So we quickly realized that it's important for us to really understand what else is coming. A lot of stuff is coming from the sky, including ours. And as Siddesh showed you, we've figured out a two-way communication through our volunteers, through our people on the ground. But it was key to also understand what the government was doing. And so we decided to try out phone-based surveys, which was something very new for Pratham as well. A lot of whatever surveys we've done in the past are usually face-to-face. The most famous one, the ASER survey, is a household survey where we go to every house. But now we had to quickly adapt, retrain ourselves, and think of doing a phone-based survey to understand how all of this content was really being consumed by children. And here we were purely focusing on whatever the government was providing. In some states, it included Pratham's resources. In some places, it didn't. They had curated this content from a wide variety of sources. So and we did multiple surveys like this in the last 3 months in different states. I'm just going to share some takeaways from one of them, which was quite large. So I do want to share some takeaways from it, where we were able to talk to about 4,000 parents and children, about 1,000 government school teachers and headmasters, and it span across 5 states. But one of the key takeaways that we found was that the intervention that they did through the smartphone and reaching the child was quite successful, as we found that 80% of the respondents said that yes, they regularly, at least 2 to 3 times a week, they're supposed to at least receive it every day, but at least 2 to 3 times a week, they were receiving content from their teacher. And moreover, 80% also said that they could complete the task. So from these 2 points, we can clearly see that the content was actually reaching some number of kids who had a smartphone and internet, and they were also able to solve it. The flip side to all of this was, again, while interviewing teachers, we found out that the teacher was only able to reach to about 20% of her class. Now, suppose she had 100 kids that she could directly reach out to, she could only reach to 20% because, firstly, half her class did not have a smartphone, so didn't have internet. So whatever the government was providing to her, she couldn't really pass it on to the child. And secondly, because this happened so suddenly, everyone didn't have everyone's phone number. And it wasn't that easy to even get these phone numbers and start a communication channel. So it was interesting that whatever content was being shared, children were who had smartphones were using it, but they weren't reaching everyone. We also found out that teachers were very proactive on their own. Teachers always have, they have access to their own content, to their own textbooks, their own textbooks. And so they were able to create their own content as well. And a third of the teachers also reported that they themselves were sending SMSs or doing phone calls with children who they knew their WhatsApp or smartphone-based content was not reaching. So these were just some of the key takeaways. It was a very extensive survey with a lot more findings. But just based on these key takeaways, Pratham had certain learnings. The first one was that that we need to avoid duplication. We see that it's not only Pratham that's sending content, it's the government as well. So we should be able to promote, support, and facilitate, as well as continuously provide feedback to the state governments to say how the content is being received. Secondly, as you know, we can't reach everyone through smartphones because of lack of internet or the device itself. So other mediums that Pratham itself has explored, but now the government is also beginning to explore through SMS, through TV, through radio. These are other key technology structure that can be used to reach out to children. And finally, we should empower the teacher and set up some sort of a formal two-way communication for the teachers as well, so that they can continuously communicate with the students, with parents, and ensure that this learning is happening continuously. So this was just a very brief snapshot of a very extensive study that we did. We continue to do this because, as we know, sitting at home, the situation on the ground keeps on changing. There's a lot of inputs going, but very little do we know about how it's being consumed, how good is it, how bad is it, what needs to be improved. So Pratham, from time to time, through the measurement team, does such surveys. So this is where we've reached till now. I'll hand over to Mihika to talk about some of the challenges that we face moving ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Karthik. So it's rather clear that the past 3 to 4 months have been a period of immense learning for us collectively as we quickly try to change how we do what we do. Be it trying to figure out what was the content that should go out, how do you fit that content in a 160 character SMS, how do you deliver it, be it the importance of creating that human connect, following up with phone calls and ensuring that there's a two-way communication channel in place such that it's not just the message that is reaching the child, but also action that being taken in the household by the parents, between the children, or be it leveraging the social structures that we had, the community networks and the parent networks, and how they came to the forefront when we suddenly tried to go remote in our approach. As we consolidate these learnings and move ahead, it's very clear that there are a lot more challenges and uncertainties that lie in the next say couple of months, and all of which even we probably don't have answers to yet, but we've started some thinking to that end at this stage. And if I were to talk about what some of these uncertainties and challenges are, I divide them into immediate or short term, which are more at an organizational level, and some which are more far reaching and long term at a country level, as well as for children and communities directly. So at an organizational level, it's clear that remote communication is going to be the norm moving forward for the foreseeable future. And what that does is that a lot of our programmatic work, be it planning, training, assessment, which were crucial elements to ensure the success of our programs, are now going to have to shift gears and become remote. And so how do we build our capacity? And when we say our capacity, we mean 7,000 people across the length and breadth of the country in different languages, while maintaining while maintaining a certain degree of standardization, yet contextualizing where required. So how do we all kind of rise to the challenge here is going to be one thing definitely that we're going to try and figure out. And at the same time, also building our capacity to approach our communities from a lens that goes beyond education, and also covers some of the more immediate pressing needs that the communities may have before we can begin learning, as we call it, in the communities. And the second is that remote learning is bound to continue over the next few months. But how do we ensure that it continues to engage and sustain interest and participation levels of parents and children the way it has been over the past few months? How does the content need to adapt, progress, and change? Because this is clearly something that will continue for the next few months. If we look at this at a countrywide or national level, we're all aware that the country is going to open up at different stages in different phases, and it's going to vary from region to region. There are going to be areas where there is no mobility or next to no mobility. There are going to be areas where there is limited movement and partial mobility, and there are going to be areas where there is free movement. And so between all these areas, how do we have approaches to cater to all of these three situations individually, as well as one that adapts in and out of these approaches as the situation changes? And as far as school reopenings are concerned, this is probably one of the most awaited events of the year, when schools finally reopen and children finally begin going back to school. But when we think of school reopenings, it's probably not going to be a one-time affair, especially in high-risk areas. Schools may open and then close again, given if the incidence of COVID cases go up, and may close again. And so any approach that is followed will have to continue to have a strong community component. And how do we engage, how do we encourage that in our work, is going to be something to think about. And finally, if we think about this at a child or a community level, the past 3 to 4 months have been a period of extreme uncertainty. There have been job losses, there have been migration, and so families would be grappling with financial insecurities and personal difficulties. And in this kind of a situation, um, fear and caution is also likely to factor into their decision making for children coming back to school. And how do we in this situation support this transition, make it as smooth as possible, make it as stress free as possible for children and parents, and in a way help children re-enroll to school almost in a post-COVID situation, is something we'll have to think about. And finally, given prolonged absence from school, the learning gaps in terms of foundational learning abilities that we generally expect to see at the beginning of an academic year would have widened in this period. And so how do we support children in a way where it is a no hurry approach, it is done in a comfortable period of time? And at the same time, learning gap is one piece, but there's been enough research and enough studies to show that girls and women are often more badly hit when it comes to a crisis. And so how do we take care of all of these aspects as we move forward is something that we'll have to think about. Manushree, if you'd like to just talk about the organizational piece.
So, I'm going to just take us back to the slide that Karthik had showed earlier in the presentation, the 5 C's that we want to talk about. If you notice, over the course of the presentation, we've covered 4, and there's one that remains, which is capacity. As I mentioned when I was talking about our immediate response earlier, that the immediate response demanded, there was a quick reaction that was needed. We had to respond in whatever fashion we could, given the resources we had and the capacity we had at that time. This is all due to the suddenness of the lockdown, as well as the need for quick engagement to make sure that the social structures don't collapse. But it's evident now that it was very easy when we were talking about it initially to say there's a pre-COVID, there's a COVID period, and there's a post-COVID. But I think more and more people are starting to accept that there is going to be a longish period where we have to coexist with the virus. Whatever we are calling as the new normal, where, as Mihika mentioned, there is going to be uncertainty in how things open up. There may be opening up and then sudden closing again in case the cases surge. There will, of course, be a decentralized way of operating. One size cannot fit all across the country, not even within the same district or city for that matter. So in the longer run, if we have to adapt to this new normal, the term that gets thrown around very often, there are certain changes that need to be made from the capacity perspective. If I talk about our internal calendar, every year, this period of May, June has always been for us the summer break to do certain activities, certain deep dives, R&Ds in the communities, learn from those experiences, and devote the June-July phase to our own people's capacity building. So moving away from the summer engagement that we did during the COVID lockdowns, we are now starting to look at the learnings that Siddesh and Karthik have talked about, and of course many other that we have been able to capture internally, and trying to systematize them as we move forward to build our people's capacity to operate in this new normal. There are 3 P's that we usually talk about from an organizational perspective. There is people, there is programs, and there is pesa, money, right? So we need to be able to keep all these 3 in mind as we talk about designing the next step for us, because as Karthik talked about earlier, money, being able to do more with less, is going to be something that we have to accept in this sector in general, given the way funding will be mobilized going forward, will be channelized going forward more towards health and social protection, and rightly so. From a capacity perspective, we have to relook at all of our resources. These are people who have been working with communities on a daily basis over many years. For them to be able to first be comfortable with technology themselves before they are asked to work with anchors in the community and make those change agents. So there is a general upskilling that needs to happen from a technology perspective, from using technology and leveraging digital resources perspective, which is nothing to do with the other technical skills that they need to have, which is on the academic and training and content front. Secondly, these people need to be flexible in terms of how to work with children, to be able to work directly today and then remotely tomorrow is something that they need to be comfortable with. They need to be able to map it out for themselves, because even within a state operational level, each team head may be supervising 5 people who may be working in different in areas that may be marked as different zones as as we move forward through the year and navigate through the pandemic. Lastly, the communication aspect in the post-COVID world is going to be very important. It is no longer something about Pratham's program that Pratham wants to do. It is about how are we going to work towards getting children back to school? How are we going to work towards making sure that, towards mitigating the kind of damage this period has done, and towards making sure that there is a sustained interaction between schools and parents despite further lockdowns. And for that, the person's capacity to be able to bridge this gap between schools and communities, given our history of having worked in this manner, is going to be crucial. So this person doesn't need to know to just work with children or their mothers or parents, but also with teachers who themselves are going to be extremely stressed when the schools reopen, burdened by whatever are the steps that the government is taking in in mitigating this the time that we've lost. But outside of this internal challenge, we are of course talking about what our approach is going to be going forward. From the capacity perspective, some of the key things that we are doing right now is that although we have a vision for the entire, the 9 months that remain for this year, but at the same time, it is important to take one step at a time. So planning for the quarter is important, making sure what you want to do within the quarter, but at the same time, for this, leaving aside ample amount of time to upskill your staff on the ground, to make sure that all of the things that you're going to make them do that they have to do, you give them time to readjust to this new normal, while also keeping the show going is an important aspect. And internally, for example, for us, we've just begun with this exercise. Mid-June, we had one of our first meeting with 200 plus leadership folks on Zoom to discuss the way forward. And we know that it is a challenge, but it is something that needs to be done. The time needs to be set aside to be able to have a workforce that is able to deliver on things that we are thinking of doing. But when I talk about the things that we want to do, I'll hand it over to Karthik as we talk about the action plan for reopening.
So I just want everyone to dream a little. I know everyone has been thinking about when will school reopen, and there are countless articles that come out daily talking about SOPs being delivered and taking opinions of different people and all of that. And that's great, and it should happen. But one thing that we want to stress upon is that everyone should be getting ready for school right now. So as of today, regardless of if schools are opening or not, everyone, Manishi, could you just?
Yeah.
Everyone should be getting ready to return to school today. It's the month of July. In majority places, summer holidays are over. So there should be some learning that should happen continuously at home. There should, if it's possible, in various parts of the country, mohalla-wise activities could maybe start, maybe in groups, but of course, keeping in mind all social distancing and health precautions. And finally, in the community, there should be some sort of halchal to say that, yes, school is going to open. Now, when Pratham sees school reopening, we think of it as a celebration. We think of it as an indicator of normalcy returning as well. I think everyone does. And it's also an important time for the school system as well as the community to prepare itself. One important thing that has been previously mentioned as well is that you need to track daily attendance. You need to ensure that all children are enrolled in schools, especially vulnerable groups. Mihika mentioned about that earlier. Additionally, a lot of children have been promoted now. So there are these crucial transition periods from preschool to formal school, from primary school to upper primary, and so forth. So we need to ensure that children are in school, and there's also been reverse migration. So there'll be more children who are in the village. So there needs to be a lot of preparation that goes in to ensure that children are back in school. Obviously, taking the opinions and feedback of parents is key when any school is open. Now, once schools do reopen, at least how Pratham likes to say it is that we should meet the child at his or her level, and this can be done by doing a very simple one-on-one oral assessment, and basically just to reconnect with the child. We know due to this because of prolonged school closure, there has been significant learning loss, and that will be a reality. But soon as children come back to school, a quick, easy assessment done by a teacher with the child will give him or her a lot of information about where the child is at. Based on this information, she or he can develop, can set very simple and achievable goals. And another goal that we feel that should be there, at least for this academic year, is by the end of this current academic year, which will be shortened probably 5 or 6 months, that all children in grade 3 and above should be able to read confidently, should be able to comprehend what they're reading, and should be able to do basic arithmetic. And at the same time, we continuously track this type of progress to see if we're meeting these goals. Now, to achieve these goals, we have to do something. And what we need to do is quite straightforward. We need to get ready to learn by building the foundations of learning. For children in pre-primary and grade 1 and 2, we should focus on school readiness skills. And for grade 3, 4, and 5, we should probably focus just spending 1 hour a day on math and 1 hour a day on reading to improve their basic literacy and numeracy. Finally, one thing that has taught us a lot during the last 3 months, that the role of the parent is crucial. They have stood up in the time of crisis right now, and they should be a central character in whatever we do once school reopens. So this is our wish list. This is what Pratham would want to do, and I'm sure many here would also think the same. So it's time to okay, we're ending now. Okay, over time. So great. So thank you for patiently listening and writing some great comments and questions. We can take these questions now. Who is Manishi? Are you going to be the one who's moderating it?
Yeah, I'll just moderate some of the questions. I know we don't have that much time, so
over time.
Yeah, so whichever questions we miss out right now, we'll request the team at Arthan will request Satyam, Mridula to just share these questions with us. We'd be happy to respond later on as well. I'll start taking a few questions from this list. I'm sorry, this is going to be because there's a lot of them actually, and I haven't taken a look at them right now. Presentation, yes, that can be shared. I think the Arthan team will be able to talk to that. The recording, I'm guessing, would be available on YouTube. So one of the questions for the team here is that where and how can one, an education not-for-profit access the thousands of games and videos and learning applications that we're talking about? So Karthik, if you could just share the information for that right now.
So all this content in a variety of ways is available on prathamopenschool.org. If you go there, all these digital games and content that we have are there. Along with this, the campaign that we're running, Corona Thodi Masti Thodi Padhai, if you can subscribe to it, then every alternate day we'll also send you small WhatsApp messages that we spoke so much about. So it's all freely available and everyone can access it. Of course, in our presentation and all that, we'll share the links where one can get access to these to this content.
I'm also responding to certain questions like for collaboration and such with email IDs in the list. So please do see the chat here. For any collaborations, you can reach out to us at resources@pratham.org. Otherwise, our email IDs, our LinkedIn information was also accessible, available, shared during this webinar. You can write to us personally and we can connect you to the right folks internally. One question is that I see that Delhi is not mentioned. You have schools directly run by Pratham or those supporting governments. So Delhi actually was mentioned in the presentation under IVR, which is a interactive voice response approach of reaching out to children, and we partnered with the Delhi government for that. In the sense that we shared our content, which was used amongst other players by Delhi government to reach out to children. There are no schools that Pratham directly runs pre-COVID or post-COVID as such. Our aim has always been to work within the system to improve access as well as learning levels for children within the government school setup. And that's what we essentially do. So that's one question. The question for Mihika, how did you orient, train mothers in order to ensure quality and processes of these activities?
So that's a great question. Our mothers were people who we'd been engaging with pre-crisis, pre-COVID. And how we ensure that there is effective translation of what is written in a text message in terms of action, and what the bridge between those two was nothing but the follow-up phone calls that we did. So every time an activity went out to mothers, the Pratham team member would call up mothers. And this was especially in the case of SMS messages, because WhatsApp messages are a lot more dynamic. There is a video and you can see and observe what is happening. But with an SMS message, in case there were mothers who may not be literate, etc. So there were phone calls that were done to support the mothers in understanding the activity first. And then there were follow-up phone calls done to take feedback in terms of whether the activity was done effectively, whether they faced any challenges, and so on and so forth. And then with mothers and parents sharing back photos, videos, it became clearer to us which activities are working and where more support is required. And that's why this human connection of a Pratham team member and a mother or a parent continuously communicating, it finally reached a point where if a message was not going out in time and not reaching the parents by 8 a.m. in the morning, we'd start getting phone calls from the parents asking for the message and saying, why has the message not come out today? And so that's how we plan to keep the communication going, keep the conversation going, and ensure that what is sent also replicates into action on the field.
There's a question here asking if we work in Karnataka. Yes, we do. Again, you can reach out to us and discuss if you want to volunteer or support in any way. At this time, one of the things that we'd love for support in is translation and subtitling for regional languages. And that's something that if you'd want to be interested in doing, you can write to us and we'll try to make a connection. Of course, if you want to leverage content which is already present in Kannada, happy to do that as well. There's a question about working with corporate volunteers in semi-urban areas. So yes, we've worked extensively in the past with corporate volunteers as well. There is of course the traditional form of volunteering where corporate volunteers have come to our schools, where we come to the schools where Pratham's running learning camps, or Anganwadis where we are working and interacted with children directly. The other way is that we're often exploring now is a skill-based volunteering system where we are engaging with corporates who support us in another layer of kind of support where we leverage their skill sets specifically for something that we may be developing internally. So we've worked with corporate volunteers in developing apps alongside us, in doing a feasibility analysis for us and such. Right now, however, that is not something we want to, the on-ground volunteering is something we don't want to do. We don't want to talk about what can happen on the ground right now, given how uncertain the situation is. And we would not want to put anyone in a situation where we are asking people to, be in contact and not actually pay attention to social distancing, so to say. A question for, I think, Siddesh or Karthik, how many students does a village volunteer manage? And did you see an optimum student-volunteer ratio?
Yeah, so, I mean, this varies by volunteer. Like I spoke about different types of volunteers. One is a parent, another is a village youth, then there is a sibling. So usually it's seen that parents do these activities with their own children. Whenever they get a chance, either in the morning or in the evening, if they're going in the field, then usually they do it in the morning. But parents usually, or mothers, even for the early years age group, they usually do these activities with their own children. Then there are siblings who usually support these children. So there could be basically in their own house, or maybe in the next household or in the neighborhood. That's the basic reach of the children. So it varies from 1 to 5 children. It depends upon how mobile the volunteer is within the village. What is the current situation in that village? Can they move around? And according, so they are, whatever they are able to volunteer, however, how many children they are able to support, that range varies from 1 to 5, I would say.
So there are a couple of questions which are talking about COVID resilience and the fact that did we raise extra funds for remote learning intervention, and how could we respond so quickly? So I briefly mentioned this during the presentation, so had Mika and Karthik, I believe, that we had been working on this digital program for over half a decade now. So we happen to have a big repository of content that we've redeployed, and of course there was some newer content that was created. In terms of funds, what we were able to do was engage with our donors to discuss how the existing funds that they were providing to us for working on the ground can be used to now work remotely. So any expenditure that was previously being done on travel was now being used to support phone recharges, data packs for our team. Internet and such is being used to be able to allow teams to access Zoom and other paid services. Personnel, which is our biggest cost, remains static because it's the same number of people who were previously doing this work are being engaged in now, but otherwise there has been redirection of funds internally and redeployment of people who were previously doing the traditional work and are now supporting the translation or creation of the digital content. So that's about it in terms of the resilience and being able to respond so quickly. So there is another question, which is, Siddesh, how did we select the 11 villages that you presented the data for?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So basically, I love questions on data, so that's why I'm very excited. So basically, in some of our villages, we had a very strong connect, and these are part of our flagship program, where we have had a history of collecting child-wise data across the village. So we had a repository of data over time from 2018-19 to now. So given that our strength of our connect in these villages, the data that we already had of children in terms of learning levels, we selected these 7 villages accordingly so that we could use the past data to understand where we are right now. And based on what activities are done, accordingly we could measure if there is any kind of progress in terms of engagement or in terms of support. So basically it was more on what the quantum of data available for a particular village, if that is high, if the connect is strong, based on that we selected these 11 villages.
Karthik, there's a question: is the new draft policy of education policy, national education policy, include Pratham for capacity building, or I'm guessing if we can take it on a slightly more broader note, the suggestions that we've made or the work that we do, does it talk about any of those things in the NEP?
Well, right at the beginning, it talks about having a focus on basic foundations, which is something that is important more than ever. And as we spoke about, when school reopens, it's important to connect with the children at their level and provide them inputs so that their basic foundations of learning in literacy and numeracy can be met. This has been clearly outlined in the National Education Policy in the first chapter. Along with that, the government is going to launch a mission on foundational learning in December. So it's an important time. The government is talking about it. There's no time like the present. So yeah, it's mentioned in the NEP, and we are working towards that.
There's a question about is Pratham working with government to modify syllabus for the upcoming academic year? And I would like to take it in a slightly broader fashion: is how are we working with governments towards reopening? So Karthik, feel free to add, but what we are doing essentially, the dream slide that Karthik showed to us at the end, which is what Pratham wants to be able to be the right way of opening up. This is a recommendation and a form of guidelines using this have been created and been been shared with governments wherever we usually engage with the government. For example, in a couple of states, those have been adopted as part of the government's guidelines on how they're going to open up. So under the school and education section, some of these guidelines have been adopted. So that continues to be a recommendation, which includes not focusing on the usual curricula, which is generally heavy, but more about foundations, mitigating the learning loss, and being able to get all the children to a level where they can read and do basic operations and number recognition and such. Karthik, anything to add there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you covered it.
Okay. Okay. The question for I think all of us: how can social edtech startups leverage the kind of services that Pratham is providing? All of the content that we are creating is available online. You can write to us to discuss a collaboration. It can be a support where we can be supported by you in addition to our content being shared with you. Otherwise, you can use the content that's available on YouTube as well as on our websites, which continues to be in all the regional languages that we work in. How do you see the regional language ecosystem being strengthened, as a lot of resources are being shared in English and a lot of knowledge sharing sessions are also being conducted in English?
So one thing that at least Pratham does in various states is similar to this. This is at a national level, but at a state level, they do hold webinars and talk about in regional languages. I know in Bihar, a lot of prominent people from Bihar or around the country come and talk to our teams, and other people are also invited. So it's not done so systematically across the board, but different states are taking up initiatives to, similar to what we've done today, share their experiences and collaborate with a lot of people who want to support the cause of what we're doing.
There are a few questions I see here around being able to manage creation of volunteers in these channels with, were we not scared of physical distancing and such. So there was no physical movement. All of this was done remotely. I think somewhere the data showed that a lot of these volunteers are new. So a large chunk, which is around 60% or so, were our volunteers that we already had within the system from our previous programs pre-COVID. And then there were newer volunteers who were, elder siblings or folks within the village who were now stuck at home and were interested in participating in getting access to this information, these activities, and they signed up with the with our folks on the ground to receive this information. So all of this was done remotely. Mihika, preschool is about interactive sessions and physical activities. Can it be replaced with online tutorials?
Very, very interesting question. And I don't think there is one right answer to this, but how much can we do? In fact, the home is something that we've always looked at as a very important part of the child's learning, even in a regular environment. While the child spends 3 hours in an Anganwadi center in a preschool, he or she does spend most of their time in the household. And engaging parents and engaging children together to make the household environment more stimulating has always been a very important focus area in what we do. And so this, the crisis, the hidden opportunity in the crisis was actually that we got to really accelerate our work to that end. And of course, there are some activities that can be done better in a group setting when it comes to social emotional learning, etc. And we're hoping that as we move forward, as slowly the country starts to open up, we'll be at least able to resume activities in smaller groups so that in the neighborhood, if children and mothers can sit together and begin engaging. But there's a lot that we have been able to do within homes with the support of parents and other family members. And that has been really inspiring to see and has been quite an eye-opener for us also. But yes, we're looking forward to the next phase where we can begin our group interactions all over again.
So I think that was the last question we could take live. As I mentioned earlier, we would request the team at Artsan to share these questions with us, and all 4 of us plus a lot of folks at our end would be interested in responding to these. We have a dedicated team that looks at the digital work that we do, both technology as well as creation of this content and resource. So we can involve them in making sure that your questions are actually being being responded to. And yeah, so that's it from us. Over to you, Mridula, Satyam.
Thank you so much, Manushi, and to all the other speakers as well today. I'm just going to quickly sum up the entire day and also launch a couple of polls, because we just want to get an understanding of who attended the session today and what they're taking back from the session. So while everybody present can just answer the poll questions, I'm just going to like touch upon a couple of things that were spoken today. So while we got an understanding of how Pratham operates and used to operate pre-COVID, you know, just to get a sense of the challenges that we're seeing, whether it's because of all the lockdowns that happened or because of lack of movement, lack of awareness, lack of preparedness and technology, or the internal challenges that not just Pratham as an organization, but I'm sure many other organizations are also facing, just to get a sense of all of those and to see that how we can create programs based on the challenges that we're facing and how do we kind of mitigate those. So whether it was the content that we're developing, the community angle that you touched upon, as well as the collaborations that are important going forward. So I guess that's something that is very key. One of the things that really stood out for me was when you spoke about the content that is being generated. You know, I actually started thinking about like the different kinds of tools and methods that we're using to reach out to people, and the examples of Sesame Street and Blue's Clues as examples came to my mind, that there were also a lot of research and efforts that going into developing those kind of programs and to reach out to kids in a fun and engaging way, but also to help them learn a lot more. But I also see the importance of being agile as organizations, whether it is through the reach and the measurement and the tracking that we're doing as organizations, to ensure that what we're doing is actually having some sort of an impact. So that is as well a very important aspect of what organizations probably should look at going forward. As well as, you know, like you guys have already mentioned the whole dream slide and everything going forward of when we open up, how are the new systems, the new scenario, the new normal is going to look like, and what are the foreseeable challenges that we can probably look at and you know, kind of solve for those. So thank you once again, Manushi, Siddesh, Mihika, and Karthik for joining us today. I have the first poll here with me, and I'm just going to end that and also launch the second one just to so we see also we had a lot of people from education, nonprofit startups, and obviously their area of interest was education majorly. And a lot of organizations were smaller size, working in tier 1, tier 2 cities. And there were organizations that also are more than 500 in terms of the size of workforce. So that's interesting to know. And I'm just going to quickly launch the feedback poll as well, just to get an idea of what people really thought of today's sessions. So yes, thank you again to all the four of you for joining us. As mentioned, we will be sharing the questions that have been unanswered with you, so you guys can get back to all the people today. And we'll be sharing the, like Manushi said, we'll share the presentation with people who attended today, so they can also get a better understanding. I would just also take this opportunity to announce that we will be back on the 14th of July with a track on women's leadership in the development sector, where we will understand how more women can work towards leadership positions in the sector and what we can as a whole, as a society, as a sector can do to support it. The details are going to be available on our website, arthanevents.com, and you can write to us at content@arthancareers for any other information. Thank you, and I'm gonna give the results of the second poll as well. So as we can see, most of the people, almost 90% of the people agree that this session has given them a better understanding of restructuring programs during crisis. And they're going to be applying their this learnings from the session to their own organizations. So thank you once again to all four of you, and hope you all have a great day and a great weekend ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.